All right, hello everybody. We are going to be covering the Thomas Fire that occurred in California in 2017. I'm Courtney Brown.
I'm Ella Bailey.
I'm Haley Grant.
I'm Ariel Levy.
And then first to start off, just a general overview of the Thomas Fire and the background. It began on December 4th, 2017, and was officially declared put out on January 12th, 2018. It occurred in both Ventura and Santa Barbara County. On the map on the right-hand side, you can see how it stretched that entire radius and where the two counties meet. It impacted the following communities of Ventura, Ojai Valley, Lake Casitas, Santa Ynez Mountains, Carpinteria, and Montecito. And then you can also see on the map where the evacuations were declared mandatory as well as voluntary. And then the ecosystems of the area and what resulted in the fire burning so rapidly and intensely. Firstly, the vegetation of the area. The most common vegetation is going to be chaparral, oak woodlands, and coastal sage shrubs. You can see on the three images on the right-hand side. The first one is going to be the chaparral, the second is going to be the coastal sage shrubs, and the third is going to be the oak woodlands. And overall, what were the landscape characteristics and ecology that caused the fire to spread? It mainly impacted a mix of both suburban and ex-urban areas. So there were some residential homes that were destroyed in combination with all of the vegetation and wooded areas. The terrain was highly mountainous as well as rolling hills, which made it difficult for fire crews to get to the actual start and spark of the fire. It was carried so far because of the high winds, commonly known as the Santa Ana winds in the southern half of the state. So it was a combination of those as well as the coastal winds coming in from the ocean. And overall, there was low moisture and lack of rain. It actually occurred in the beginning of the wet season, so no rain had fallen significantly enough yet to prevent the fire. And then overall, what was the cause of the fire? It was started when two lines came into contact. It's actually a phenomenon that happens so frequently, it has its own name of the line slap. These lines were owned by the Southern California Edison Company. When the lines struck each other, hot molten sparks were shot out, falling on the dry fuel surrounding them. There was overall quite a few investigation teams that stated and decided what deemed the fire. It was the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, as well as Santa Barbara Fire.
The agencies who responded to the U.S. Forest Service, because the fire was one of the worst that California had ever seen, there was a long list of federal, state, and public and privately owned, but state and federally regulated companies, as well as many local agencies that were burned in the area, the Ventura County Fire, Sheriff, and Police Departments, as well as the County Office of Emergency Services, and the Santa Barbara County Fire, Sheriff, and Office of Emergency Management. The fire officials had also requested assistance through a state-to-state mutual aid system. Firefighters and emergency responders came from across the western United States to help. At one point, nearly 9,000 emergency personnel were working on the fire. The Thomas Fire was officially contained after 39 days, and soon after, Cal Recycle was tasked by the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services with the management and removal of debris and material from the structures destroyed by the Thomas Fire. Cal Recycle then hired Tetra Tech to help expedite this effort in compliance with Cal, OES, and Federal Emergency Management Agency. To look at the factors that led to the Thomas Fire being so destructive, we can look at the elements of the fire behavioral triangle. Weather, topography, and fuel. The weather in the area at the time of the fire was hot and dry. It had been a very and it had been for a while. Because it was the end of an extremely long fire season, this meant there was very low humidity in the air and the vegetation was very dry, making it very easy for the fire to catch and spread. The winds in the area The Santa Ana winds can be famously strong, like they were on the day of the fire, allowing for a lot of oxygen to move the fire along very quickly and blowing embers horizontally along the ground, spreading the fire that way as well. The topography had mountainous ranges and valleys going from east to west, which is the same direction as the prevailing winds, and limiting access for firefighters and necessary equipment. It was nearly impossible for firefighters to fight the western front of the fire, and instead they focused on evacuation. Crews drove out from the Ventura County Fairgrounds and headed to the residential streets in the south-facing foothills of Carpinteria, where they set up a defensive position and waited in case the fire came to them.
The Thomas Fire had a tremendous and far-reaching impact on the communities of Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. When it began in early December of 2017, strong Santa Ana winds and arid vegetation caused the fire to spread at an almost unimaginable speed. Entire neighborhoods in Ventura were overrun within hours, leaving families with only minutes to evacuate. Over 1,000 homes, businesses, and structures were destroyed, and many more were damaged. This created a massive displacement of residents. At the peak of the fire, more than 100,000 people were under evacuation orders. The communities also faced huge disruptions in their day-to-day lives. School closed for extended periods, businesses shut down, and roads became inaccessible due to fire activity and emergency response efforts. The fire damaged the electrical infrastructure, leading to widespread power outages. Air quality became a major health concern across the region, with smoke drifting for miles and causing respiratory issues for vulnerable populations like children and the elderly and people with asthma. Even after the flames were out, the impacts continued. The fire left massive burn scars across the mountains above Montecito and Carpinteria. Without vegetation to stabilize the soil, these areas were extremely vulnerable to debris flows. Only weeks after the fire, a heavy rainstorm triggered mudslides in Montecito, which destroyed additional homes and caused significant loss of life. This showed that the Thomas Fire's impact wasn't just immediate destruction. It set off a chain of long-term consequences that fundamentally changed these communities and their sense of safety. Monterey costs and costs on life. The Thomas Fire became one of the most expensive wildfires in California history, with total damages estimating at more than $2.2 billion. This includes destroyed homes, infrastructure losses, and the massive cost of firefighting operations that lasted over a month. The economic impact didn't stop where the fire was contained. Business closures, insurance claims, and long-term rebuilding added even more financial strain on the region. In terms of lives lost, the fire directly caused the deaths of one civilian during evacuation and one firefighter on the line. Many others suffered injuries and severe smoke-related health problems. The emotional toll on families who lost homes and communities that were displaced was enormous and loud-lasting. Wildfire also faced significant loss. The fire burned more than 2,800,000 acres of oak, woodland, coastal sagebrush, and it also destroyed food sources and shelter for many species. Even the animals that survived struggled to adapt to the changed landscape. The aftermath made things even worse when heavy rain triggered the Montecito mudslides, causing 23 additional deaths and large-scale damage. This event showed how a single wildfire can lead to a long-term compounding cost for people, ecosystems, and the entire community.
Okay, the Thomas Fire scale and devastation became a really big turning point for wildfire policy within California. So first, after the fire, one of the major changes involved Emergency alerts and warnings. During the Thomas Fire, many residents in both Ventura and Santa Barbara counties never received timely evacuation notices. So as a result, California passed Senate Bill 833 in 2018, which required every county to follow standardized emergency alert protocols using the wireless emergency alert system, and they also were required to train operators properly. Another bill, SB 821, allowed counties to automatically enroll residents into local alert systems using utility company data via cell phone and making sure people wouldn't miss any life-saving warnings. The second major policy shift focused on utility safety and wildfire prevention. So investigations showed that power lines owned by the Southern California Edison sparked parts of this fire, and this led to SB 901, also in 2018, which required utilities to submit annual wildfire mitigation plans. This is to help improve vegetation management and harden their electrical grids. And the state also gave regulators the power to review and enforce these safety plans. Next came improvements in fire prevention and forest management. SB 1260 made it easier for agencies to conduct prescribed burns, and these are controlled fires that reduce dangerous fuel buildup statewide. And CAL FIRE received new funding to expand these programs. And then lastly, housing and insurance were also affected. AB 38 launched California's first home hardening program to help homeowners make their houses more fire resistant. And then later, AB 3074 created the Ember Resistant Zone, which is requiring a 5-foot non-flammable buffer around your home. And then on the insurance side, SB 824 protected homeowners in fire zones by preventing insurance companies from canceling policies for at least 1 year after a declared wildfire disaster. And then looking back, several prevention measures could have reduced the Thomas Fire's destruction, though it is very important to note that the extreme wind and drought made conditions incredibly challenging. So first, power line safety, since the fire was sparked by electrical equipment. Today's public safety power shutoffs might have prevented the initial ignition. These shutoffs allow utilities to temporarily cut power in high wind and high-risk conditions. In 2017, these procedures did not yet exist. So modern grid improvements such as covered power lines, underground cables, and faster circuit shutoffs could have significantly reduced the chance of sparks ignited. Second, the new statewide alert system ensures people get immediate wireless alerts, something many didn't receive during the night the Thomas Fire happened. And then third, most homes ignited not from direct flames, but from embers carried by the wind. This is known as embercast. So modern ember-resistant construction, such as Class A roofs, metal vents, fire-resistant siding, and then that 5-foot zone 0 buffer with no vegetation could have greatly reduced structure losses. And then fourth, strategic fuel management using prescribed burns, fuel breaks, and vegetation clearance near communities can slow down the spread of a wildfire, even under tough conditions. And then finally, the deadly mudslides that followed remind us the importance of post-fire planning, and that stronger debris flow mapping and early evacuation warnings, which are now standard practice, can still prevent these tragedies that often follow these big wildfires.